This is the Nations Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. Extreme risk, severe weather, tornado outbreak targets over 20 states through Sunday. That's right, 20 states are being targeted. And obviously, most of you have probably already seen some of the damage that has occurred from these horrific tornadoes, and I'll show you some of the damage momentarily. But don't forget that tornado season is supposed to be in late May, and we are in March. But of course, as we know, the new MO is with these people, they normalize weather in bizarre patterns. We've seen storms go in the opposite direction of the jet stream. We're seeing fire tornadoes in California. We're seeing blizzards with tornadoes happening. And that's because this is nothing more than weather modification, and the majority of people don't want to believe it. Now, the majority of people have been conditioned into thinking that this is normal. That's why you see all of these movies about geoengineering, movies like Twisters, right? All these movies about natural disasters, as if that's entertaining to people to go and sit and watch these films. They're being conditioned into thinking that this is the new normal. And now that they've programmed climate change into your mind, the majority of sheeple out there are viewing all of this stuff like tornadoes hitting 20 states at once as normal. But it is anything but normal. As you see the map on your screen, we're talking about tornado warnings going from the northest point in North America to the southest point in North America. And I want to let everybody know, at the same time that this is happening, if you haven't heard either, something else they've desensitized everybody to, the Northern Lights are going to be appearing across 10 states. Some news outlets are reporting across 20 states. So we have the Northern Lights appearing at the same time as this bizarre weather pattern where 20 states are being hit with tornadoes at once. And that should be all you need to know. And if you're saying, I don't understand, the Northern Lights and tornadoes, how does that correlate? Well, I'll get into that after I show you the horror that's occurring around our country right now via weather modification.
Tonight, hurricane-force winds fueling apocalyptic scenes across the South as the region braces for a potentially devastating tornado outbreak. Intense winds whipping across Texas.
There goes another one.
Tossing multiple semi-trucks on their sides in Amarillo. Gusts reaching over 80 miles per hour. Kicking up a dangerous dust storm, visibility near zero. Causing multiple crashes across the southern plains. The Texas Department of Public Safety reporting at least 3 fatal crashes. This ambulance crushed in a crash due to low visibility in Oklahoma. As those winds caused wildfires to explode in both states, some residents ordered to evacuate.
If you notice the smoke really picking up, if you can clearly see the flames, you need to do the best thing for you and your family and get out immediately.
That storm now moving east, 113 million, stretching from Minnesota down to the Gulf Coast, facing life-threatening storms heading into the weekend. The National Weather Service in St. Louis warning, quote, today may end up as one of the more prolific severe weather outbreaks in recent memory. Authorities bracing for the possibility of multiple tornadoes overnight, increasing the risk of danger.
We want people to take things seriously every time, but we definitely have a heightened alert for today.
The wind so strong, it's opening the lids of these dumpsters behind me, giving you an idea of how strong these gusts are.
These winds are not near 70 miles an hour right now, but we're feeling the impact of just standing here and being kind of pushed to the side.
With winds expected through the night, power outages are possible.
So before you go to bed, definitely make sure your phones are charged. Make sure you have the capability of getting emergency alerts.
Adrian joins us now from St. Louis. Adrian, talk to us about this dangerous weekend ahead. The threat level is as high as it can be for parts of the South, correct?
Indeed, Ellison, and they're expecting to see some EF2
to possible, that is, tornadoes. We're talking about strong hail, damaging winds, and this will likely outbreak across the central Gulf Coast states into the Tennessee Valley. Families there should have their safety measures in place. Back here in St. Louis, where we are in the bullseye of this storm, the winds are picking up. As you see behind me, the sky is getting dark, and city leaders are encouraging people to check their cell phone devices. Make sure you have your emergency alerts turned on. Ellison.
Adrienne brought us. Thank you.
So that is the horror story that is happening right now in America. And every single week, what we're seeing is horror stories. We're seeing people's homes wiped out. We're seeing people's lives taken, people completely devastated, losing everything that they have. And then the government coming in and telling them, look, we're going to seize your land. It's unlivable now. And you're going to have to go live in a FEMA camp, which looks awfully a lot like a miniature prison. But of course, in this dystopian hell we live in, they'll convince you that it's not. You should be thankful to us that we're giving you a FEMA camp, even though we're the ones who are burning your homes to the ground in California or in Maui. And we're the ones in the Carolinas who are wiping your lives out with hurricanes. And now, of course, we're seeing tornadoes. And I mentioned earlier about how the northern lights are conveniently popping up at the same time, because that's very convenient. Now, as I always mentioned in my videos, the more you see something, you become conditioned. You become desensitized. The fact that we're seeing the northern lights so often, nobody is asking questions anymore. Nobody's saying, aren't I supposed to go to Alaska? Aren't I supposed to get one of those Carnival cruises to see the northern lights? Oh, no. You could be in New York. You could be in Florida. You could be in Arkansas. They pop up everywhere. Now, don't be suspicious about why they pop up everywhere now, because we're telling you that it's normal all of a sudden, right? That's why there's articles out there, why we've seen the northern lights so often lately, because they make up science to convince you that this is perfectly normal when it's not normal. They say things like the northern lights have had an especially active year between 2024 and 2025 that has far exceeded scientists' expectations. Aurora displays hit a 500-year peak in 2024. NASA said, which the agency expects will continue throughout 2025 as the sun remains in its solar maximum, the period in its 11-year cycle during which solar events like flares and coronal mass ejections are more common. Some of the strongest solar flares in decades have been observed over the last year, including an X 9.0 level flare in October, which caused northern lights to be visible as south as Florida. So not just Alaska anymore. So you might be saying, well, what are you getting at? I don't really understand. Well, for starters, this whole solar maximum is the reason that they're saying it's normal to see the northern lights. Although I was alive 11 years ago, I don't know if anybody out there is 11 who's listening. I would assume most of you were alive 11 years ago. I don't remember ever hearing about the northern lights appearing over Florida or other states because it wasn't normal, because it's not normal, because this is man-made. So what am I getting at? Well, if you didn't know, up in Alaska, where the northern lights, where everybody would think they'd have to go. If you ever wanted to see the northern lights, you saw it in a movie or a picture, they say, well, you got to go up to Alaska. I mean, that's the whole reason you go, to see the northern lights. People would spend money on cruises to get up there, not because they were going to lay out in the sun on the beach. They wanted to see the northern lights. But what they don't know is that HAARP runs experiments up in Alaska that causes artificial auroras to occur. And it's been documented by HAARP themselves that what they're doing up at HAARP, which they can't explain themselves, which I'll get into in a minute, is actually creating artificial auroras in the sky. In fact, they want to let you know why they're doing it, in case you're wondering. And they say why scientists use these radio transmitters to create artificial auroras. And this is what these radio transmitters look like up at HAARP. And you might be saying to yourself, okay, so there's radio transmitters up at HAARP, and there's also these NOAA towers that you've probably seen as well, or NOAA towers that we can find here in America also, but not in every single town. So you're probably thinking to yourself, all right, so you're telling me that those antennas that are sitting up in Alaska can cause the northern lights to occur down in Florida? I don't understand what you're getting at, sir. Well, what I'm getting at is, if you read between the lines, those scientists created artificial auroras using radio transmitters. And if you don't know what a radio transmitter is, well, look no further than your 5G towers. They're essentially radio transmitters that send and receive radio signals to and from devices and other cell towers, enabling wireless communication. But that's not what they're really actually there for. If you're actually falling for that, well, think again. So now you should have connected the dots between the fact that, okay, if HAARP up there can create fake aurora borealis, fake northern lights, and 5G towers do the same exact thing as HAARP, and there's ones in every single town now, which was part of the purpose of that outbreak that occurred, because they all popped up in every single town across America during the outbreak, actually across the earth, as we all know, during the outbreak. So we have these radio transmitters everywhere now. And you might be saying, okay, so let's see, tornadoes, radio transmitters, 5G towers, and HAARP. What are we getting at? Well, what we're getting is when HAARP is on, when we know that they're doing this up at HAARP in the past, there would be northern lights appearing, because what they were doing was shooting radio waves into the sky, electrifying the sky. And by manipulating the ionosphere at HAARP, they were able to harness weather modification, like steering storms or creating tornadoes by sending enough energy up into the ionosphere to see one of those spirals come right back down. And if you haven't been paying attention to the world around us, HAARP, those NOAA towers, the 5G towers, chemtrails, weapons used to produce all of the weather around us that you're seeing. Earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, tornadoes, floods, you name it, they can manipulate and create it. And sure, you might want to say that I'm a conspiracy theorist saying that they could do those types of things, but why don't you just look at the government documents for yourself? Here's one from 1996. Weather as a force multiplier. Owning the weather in 2025. So if that's not enough for you, that we have these bizarre tornadoes appearing across the entire state, north to south, right? We're not talking about Tornado Alley, a couple pop-up tornadoes in Oklahoma. They're literally showing you a map where America is covered from the top point to the bottom with tornado warnings, while all these towers are now up around us. And oh, by the way, there might be northern lights seen across America during the weekend. How convenient, because we all know that those radio transmitters up in Alaska can create northern lights, and so can those 5G towers around us. So why don't I just let the scientists explain it to you if you don't believe me? Why don't I just bring in some of the scientists from HAARP themselves who can explain what they're actually doing there? They'll give you a 5-minute lecture or so about what the control room is like and what they're doing in the stratosphere, knowing that the common person will see this, fall asleep in the middle of it, probably say, oh, it sounds like what they're doing is pretty smart. I'm not really sure about ion dynamics and very high frequency waves, and they'll pass right out. But if you listen closely, you'll hear even the people at HAARP tell you, quote, why would it be beneficial to do what we're doing up here? Well, I can't really tell you the answer to that. That's a mystery. And of course, that's a mystery to all the people working up at HAARP, because if the people found out what they were really doing, well, these people would be hunted down in the streets. Listen.
First time I visited HAARP, I didn't even know what it was. I went to HAARP as part of a physics club, the Society of Physics Students. I was a student here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and HAARP at the time held an annual open house event where the public could tour the facility and talk to the scientists.
HAARP is a facility to study the ionosphere, region 60 miles out into space. And that's a region where there's not much density. The air is very thin. Mostly plasma, which means electrons and ions.
When I saw this facility and saw how unique and interesting it was, so when I decided to do my PhD thesis research using the HAARP facility itself. HAARP stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
The federal government spent about $300 million. It's the most exquisite of its kind in the world. It's currently owned and operated by the Air Force Research Lab. And they have other priorities. They've done some tests over the years. Now they want to go do other things. So it's become a bit of an orphan sitting down there in Kokona. The U.S. has the lead in the world in this area. It would be a shame to give that up. The other facilities aren't nearly as flexible or as powerful. And HAARP can do science that the other two can't. There's a chart that shows, it compares all the heaters, including air receiver. You can see that it's quite a bit more powerful and more flexible.
It's an instrument that allows us to make small changes to the ionosphere, and then we can measure the response of the ionosphere and the upper atmosphere to the changes that HAARP is making. Scientists have categorized the various layers of the atmosphere. Most of the weather that we experience occurs in the troposphere. When we fly in commercial aircraft, we're generally flying at the top of the troposphere. Above that is the stratosphere, and above that is the mesosphere, and above that is the thermosphere. And the ionosphere is basically part of the thermosphere, which extends from about 80 to 100 kilometers altitude all the way up to about 1,000 kilometers altitude. And so the ionosphere is generally what we refer to as the partially ionized portion of the thermosphere. It's too high for weather balloons and it's too low for many satellites. And sure, we can launch rockets through the ionosphere too, as we do at Poker Flat, but those are very fast but expensive experiments. The reason why we care about the ionosphere, particularly for radio communication, is that radio waves, when traveling through free space, behave differently when they travel through a region of charged particles or plasma. The ionosphere is basically a partially ionized plasma, and so one of the things that can happen to radio waves that travel through a plasma is that they can be bent, their polarization can change, they can be absorbed. And since so much of our lives is really dependent on radio communication, either communicating to satellites or for navigation with GPS, which is also communicating with satellites essentially, or over-the-horizon communication or over-the-horizon radar, it's really important for us to understand how radio waves are affected by the ionosphere, and in some cases how radio waves affect the ionosphere in the case of HAARP or other powerful radio transmitters.
A lot of us realize how important it is, how powerful, how significant the facility is. So we're trying to figure out ways to keep it alive as an active scientific tool.
Why would it be beneficial? I can't speak for the applications, but it's a mystery to solve. We can think of the ionosphere as a natural plasma laboratory, the conditions of which are difficult to replicate in an actual physical laboratory. And so this is just another way of learning about the world around us. Why would it be beneficial? I can't speak for the applications, but it's a mystery to solve.
So, of course, HAARP doing these experiments in the ionosphere, what they're doing is heating up the sky. They heat up the sky. There's a combination of things that occur. But think about all of these frequencies that are coming out of these 5G towers. Remember, when these towers went up, nobody, even the biggest of sheeple, who think that all of this stuff is crazy stuff, not one of them would agree with the fact that your phone is operating faster than it did before those towers went up. Now, they told us those towers had to go up for 5G to function. And we all had to get to 5G to catch up to China and Russia, right? So, of course, like sheeple do, the sheeple just give in and they don't push back and they don't learn about radiation. And instead, they're trained to come after people like us when all we're trying to do is prevent people from getting cancer or giving the government the opportunity to create weather modification in every single town in America. Because if you've noticed, those towers are up absolutely everywhere. Every highway, every town, with, in fact, multiple towns. Some towns, they get cute and they try to hide it in the trees or on the water tower. You know, they got a little, they got a little spunk in them, the big brother there, right? Trying to pretend like, well, these sheep won't even notice it. We'll just stick it on top of the water tower. Unless, of course, they were just trying to be cheap and didn't want to put the entire tower up. But these things are all around us now. So they can't really tell you what the purpose is. It's a mystery what they were doing at HAARP. But we don't need to look at HAARP anymore. We should just stop even paying attention to HAARP. Because what's going on up at HAARP doesn't matter. HAARP isn't turning on the HAARP machine and creating a hurricane or a tornado down in Florida. We have these weather modification things all around us right now. Remember those stories about people in the UK that were going nuts taking those things down? Yeah, those people went to jail forever, for life, for trying to take those down. You'd think that the government would be more concerned about, people who commit murder, who only get slaps on the wrist, like 20 years in jail. Oh, they're getting worse. Don't you dare go after those towers. In fact, we'll send a message so that nobody else goes after those towers. And of course, it's about more than just weather modification. These things are radiation. These things are literally microwaves that are sitting all around us. So We don't have to focus on HAARP anymore because we can focus everywhere now, knowing that they have the ability to do this everywhere. And of course, this is not something that should be taken lightly. We need to educate people on it. I've shown you government documents. We've heard JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson talk about he who controls the weather will control the world. I mean, these are quotes from these people back in the 1950s and 60s talking about, well, whoever's going to win controlling the weather. I mean, these are things that aren't even a glit in someone's eye in 2025. They don't even know that those interviews exist, and they don't even believe. If you tell them that weather modification is real, they think you're absolutely nuts.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Right? Well, that's because they've been trained, of course. Trained to believe in, well, you can't control the weather. Those are sayings that we've heard since we were kids, right? Can't control Mother Nature. Mother Nature's unpredictable, right? Actually, Mother Nature's quite predictable when you have the tools to manipulate it and then wreak havoc on your civilians. Silent weapons for quiet wars. This is coming for all of us. I pray for everybody out there who has already been affected or who will be affected by any of this weather modification. They literally look at this. They have a map of, hey, we're going to wipe out this place, this place, this place. This is where we're going to build. This is what we're going to put there. And nobody obviously can see this. We can't see it. I can't see it. I'm not an operative. I'm sure some of your alt-right media have these maps on hand, like Shapiro and Jones and everyone else. But the regular people like us can't see it. So we don't know exactly where they're targeting. But one of the things you could do is pay attention to where they tell you smart cities are coming up, or they really want to bring in a smart city. Somebody posted on the website just today about Dallas and how Dallas really wants it. And then conveniently, Dallas is getting hit with stuff, right? Seems very like it's like a calling card. Heard it in Maui. I wanted a smart city over in Hawaii, and that happens. Of course, we know about LA with the directed energy weapons, which are really just those smart meters on the homes. How they have plans for the Olympics by 2028 to have that thing set up with smart infrastructure. They got to tear it all down to build it back up the way that they want to with their control grid. So let's just recap. It's a lot of information for anyone who's new. Now, I don't know how many of you are new. Again, we're getting hit with tornadoes at a rapid pace, right? 20 states now. People have been desensitized. Why? Well, because there's been stories about tornadoes coming here and there, and then 50 at a time, right? Arkansas, 30 tornadoes at once. And people are like, whoa, wow. But the more they hear it, the more they get desensitized, and the more they shrug it off and say, I guess this is just part of the climate change, right? They've programmed you into that. There's no such thing as climate change. This is weather modification, right? And they've also programmed you into accepting it by showing you all of these movies that they put millions of dollars into because it's a brainwashing mechanism to have you go and eat your popcorn and smile while you're watching Twisters, and the same wicked people behind the movie know that this is what your future is, and they're spell casting on you for when it happens, you to accept it. That's how it works. So at the same time, we have tornado warnings going from the top of North America to the bottom of North America. We also have northern lights appearing across America. And at one point in our society, people said, I have to go to Alaska if I want to see the northern lights. Even the beginning of last year, they started telling you, hey, there's northern lights coming again. And people are like, whoa, what? And then again and again and again. I covered it almost every month last year. Of course, all those videos are removed with the channels, Gesundheit. But they were telling people every month. And what happens to your mind naturally then? It's not a big deal anymore, right? All of a sudden, it's not a big deal. 50, tornadoes at once, not a big deal. Seeing the northern lights every day when you only could see them in Alaska, now seeing them everywhere, not a big deal. Well, they explain it away with science. They tell you it's an 11-year cycle. Not nobody remembers 11 years ago you weren't able to see the northern lights in Florida or New York or anywhere else, but now you can, right? And of course, we look up at HAARP and we say, well, that's interesting because HAARP used their radio transmitter to create artificial ones, so they weren't even real in the first place, right? And what else do we know are radio transmitters, those towers that are all around us right now? But hey, what do I know? right? I sound like one of those crazy conspiracy theorists, you know? I mean, when I see government documents called Weather as a Force Multiplier, owning the weather in 2025 by your own Air Force, dated in 1996. I mean, is it okay for me to speculate that this is actually what's happening? I mean, it is the year 2025 now, and we're seeing really, really strange weather patterns. Or, of course, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Though the government doing all these things and talking about these things and documenting these things, they were just trolling us, right? They were just having a good time. But most people's brains can't grasp all of this because they don't want to, because it's too horrifying for them to grasp. So they'd rather stay stuck in the left-right paradigm and hope that one of their political heroes or their political party will pull them out of the rut that they're in, and don't even realize they're only in a rut because the government themselves are the ones who are psychologically putting them in one, driving them insane, driving up prices, making people broke. And of course, their favorite game plan, making everybody hate one another. But I'm just a conspiracy theorist. What do I know? The government talks about owning the weather by 2025. We're in the year 2025. The weather patterns that we're seeing right now couldn't be more bizarre on a week in, week out basis. We're seeing communities wiped out off the face of the earth. The news, of course, doesn't cover it. And when people like me cover it, what happens to us? Well, we get wiped out as well. Prayers to everybody out there who is affected or who will be affected by this. But enjoy the northern lights, everybody. Isn't that pretty? That man-made aurora light in the sky. They can't do that. Oh yeah, they can, and they are. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to live in Pleasantville and think that everything's sunshine and rainbows, or you want to wake up to the fact that your government has the ability to do this, and they're using it and doing it because they can get away with it. Because otherwise, if they came to your door with a tank, the people would rise up against them. This way, well, all they'll do is just shut down people who actually bring attention to this, as we've seen them do time and time again. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.